Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second webinar from the series of free webinars covering Central Europe's issues from security to cooperation. My name is Tomasz Stępniewski and I'm Deputy Director at the Institute of Central Europe and also Associated Professor at the Catholic University of Lublin. The title of the seminar is Poland as a Leader in Shaping the European Union Eastern Partnership, the Eastern Partnership case. This webinar is organized within the grant entitled Balkan Ambitions and Polish Inspirations, which is the public task financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland within the grant competition Public Diplomacy 2022. The grant contractor is the Center for Europe, University of Warsaw. The main institutional partners of this grant are Center for International Relations, Poland, Institute of Central Europe, Poland, St. Clement Ochrydzki University Bitola, North Macedonia, University of Cyril and Methodius, Skopje, University of Montenegro, University of Niš, Serbia, Institute for Research and European Studies, North Macedonia, University of Gdańsk, Poland, University of Economics in Katowice, Poland, Polish European Community Studies Association, PEXA. The panelists of the webinar as follows: Dr. Agnieszka Bryc, Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Political Science and International Studies at the Nicolaus Copernicus University. Welcome. Dr. Marta Drabczuk, Institute of Central Europe, Eastern Department, and Assistant Professor at the Institute of Political Science and Public Administration at the Curie-Sklodowska University in Lublin. Welcome. And Dr. Jakub Olchowski is Head of Eastern Department at the Institute of Central Europe and also Assistant Professor at the Institute of Political Science and Public Administration at the Curie-Sklodowska University in Lublin. And we will hold two rounds of questions for our panelists. So let us begin with the question to Agnieszka Bryc, and the question regarding the European Union's Eastern policy in view of Russia's armed conflict against Ukraine. Is the EU as an organization responding adequately to the events in Ukraine? Should the role of countries such as Germany and France be more considerable in the conflict? In general, how do you perceive the EU's policy towards Russia? Sanctions are in place, so we agree. However, there is no consensus regarding energy issues. So what's your opinion? So the floor is yours, Agnieszka.
Tomasz, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about Eastern foreign policy, and especially in the most important period we are now facing. And so, in my opinion, because you are asking about my opinion, I think that European Union has been responding to the war in Ukraine much better than I was thinking in the very beginning. Frankly speaking, the problem is not Brussels, but the problem are individual states. So if we might complain that European Union has problems with being more united, more active, the problem is not, generally speaking, European Union, but the problem are states with their own very egoistic and very individual interests. So we should distinguish that these two reasons. And the second issue for me is that we should underline that what is happening in Ukraine has given us two new factors. To us, it means for European Union and for Eastern flank states. The first new factor is absolutely a new normal. So just imagine, in 2014, we were, as European Union, neighboring to the conflict zone. But now in 2022, we are next to the war zone. This is absolutely a new neighborhood, new problems, and new reality. And the reality is that European Union is next to a state with imperial ambitions is next to a state. It means through the common neighborhood, through Ukraine, Belarus, and so on. So we as Europe, we are neighboring to a state with a very, very aggressive new imperial policy. This is one new reality. The second one is that, how to say, this is, okay, the new reality, the second new reality is the fact that, frankly speaking, the truth, maybe not the truth, but the trust has become a victim. Because at the very beginning, we as Europe were very united. We were following an idea that first priority is to help Ukraine to survive. But within the time, we have become much more divided, and we are just hesitating whether to act more vis-a-vis Russia or just to stop and negotiate with Moscow. So that's why the new reality are two camps in Europe. The first camp I am calling the peace camp. These are states being ready to talk to Russia, to continue negotiations with Russia, and they believe that the most important is to stop immediately the war. And the second camp, and these are mostly Eastern flank countries, this is the camp of victory. Yeah? These are countries which believe that we might achieve peace and security in Europe, but only because of one achievement. And it should be Russia's defeat in military field and Russia's collapse in economic matters. So we understand that the future security of Europe and the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine is absolutely combined with just depriving Russia of its new imperial ambitions. So these are two factors I am calling new reality for Eastern flank and Europe's Eastern policy. But we also, because of that new reality, we have also a few new, let's say, 3 new opportunities to take. We have 3 chances we cannot waste. The first one is to call a spade a spade. So we have to call at the end of the day that Russia is no more a reliable partner, that the business as usual is no more possible, that we should treat Russia as a threat. And we must react vis-a-vis Russia as a direct, not a challenge, but a military threat to European countries. So this is an opportunity for us to forget about Russia first policy and to continue to develop and to think about a new and let's say very effective, the new Eastern neighborhood policy. So this is for us, I think, in a very foreseeable future, the primary task as a European Union. The second opportunity for us, I think, is to push more pressure on one of 2 in the leading couple in Europe. So if we realize that's obvious that in 2008, after Russia-Georgia war, and then in 2014, after annexation of Crimea and Donbass war, France and Germany were negotiating with Moscow the ceasefire. And we might expect that today, both countries, both our leaders might behave the same way and talk to Moscow and just allow Moscow to go to Kiev and present the President Zelensky the peace treaty. it's over. It's no more possible because of new reality in Eastern flank, because of these divisions, and because of absolutely new and very tough position of the Central and East European countries. Such a let's say role of Berlin and Paris is no more possible. So now what we might do as Poland, Czech Republic, Czechia, Baltic states is to be closer to Germany. In my opinion, this is that country. We as Poland might cooperate, might try to negotiate and make Berlin be closer to us, to Eastern flank, because Berlin is much more flexible and much more, let's say, sensitive for pressure. France, in my opinion, is looking at the conflict absolutely different. It is much more pro-Russian than Germany because of pro-Russian society, because of nuclear status of France, and because of Russia challenging French interest in Africa. At least these three elements are making France be much more in contact with Moscow. So for us, for Poland and for Eastern flank, I think we should strengthen our contacts with Berlin. We should identify, let's say, dialogue with Berlin, just to make Chancellor Scholz, and especially through the Green Party, which is absolutely along to Polish and Eastern flank perspective on Russia. So we might do our policy much more effective, but we should try to keep Berlin closer to Eastern flank. This is the second opportunity, and the third opportunity, and I think I should make a stop here, is to do everything not to allow populist countries to be sensitive for Russian interests. We should, as Poland, do everything just to improve relations with European Union, because in our Polish interest is to make Europe stronger, undivided, because this is the only opportunity just to face Russia, just to make Russia defeat. It is not only NATO, but a very, in my opinion, a key role is playing European Union, because this is that platform, this is that institution Ukraine would like to join. And this is that institution Russia is afraid because of today is Ukraine, tomorrow will be other post-Soviet republics. So that's why in our interest is to do everything just to make European Union once again be more united, because the time is really very demanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for sharing your thoughts, and thank you that you mentioned these three opportunities, which are crucial for our region and for the situation on EU's eastern neighborhood. And now it's a question for Marta Drabczuk. What is your view of the Eastern Partnership? Do you believe that the project to some extent is dead? What is your assessment of Ukraine and Moldova being granted the European Union's candidate status? How do Ukrainians themselves perceive this fact? Do they finally see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or were their expectations regarding the European Union much higher? So what's your opinion? The floor is yours, Marta.
Thank you very much for being invited to this event. It's a great pleasure for me. First of all, I want to say that, in my opinion, the Eastern Partnership stuck in a dead-end street. Of course, there are a lot of criticism to the Eastern Partnership as it was dead, for example, from the very beginning. However, I cannot agree with this statement, because the assumption of Eastern Partnership, or maybe more broadly, more widely, the EU neighborhood policy from the very beginning was launched as a format which aim was to prevent the division in Europe. And as we can see, Europe try to be joined, to be one, to make one voice, to create the cycle of friends. Of course, the neighbors, as Agnieszka mentioned, and the challenges in this neighborhood of European Union had already changed. And of course, the neighbors who are covered by Eastern Partnership are more diverse today than in 2009, when the Eastern Partnership was established. And these significant differences and significant challenges, they cannot be ignored when we are talking about Eastern Partnership of European Union. And of course, we can also observe that these neighbors do not make the common group of neighbors. Let's start from the more advanced so-called associated trio. I mean Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Of course, Ukraine and Moldova have been granted EU candidate status, as we know, but it's just the very beginning. There is still a long way to go to get to the European Union. For Georgia, European Union recognized European perspective, so it's something like a prelude to formal candidacy, but without the status of EU candidate country. Of course, Georgia is not satisfied with this fact, because as we all know, Georgia was the main candidate for membership, and just after increasing the pressure from Brussels in the recent years due to that failure of implemented the recommended reforms and this unofficial influence of Bidzina Ivanishvili to the government. So it's also the lack of a consensus in the line between President Salome Zubarishvili and the government ruled by Prime Minister Goribashvili. So it's I can in my opinion, European Union is waiting for a more suitable moment to get this status to Georgia. Moldova was also the first state, together with Georgia, which signed an associated agreement with the European Union. The granting of EU candidate status to Moldova, we can say it's just the success of pro-European Action and Solidarity Party, which now ruled this country, which made European integration one of the key elements of the political program, which was realized in the recent years. We have also Belarus. Belarus suspended its participation in Eastern Partnership in June the previous years, but although European Union declares that it will support the Belarusian people and free media, which fight for the peaceful democratic transformation of Belarusian state, despite the policy of Lukashenko regime, and despite this instrumental usage of migrants and refugees on the Polish-Belarusian border for its political purposes. In my opinion, of course, Belarus is slowly integrated with the Russian Federation. That's why it's not, it will not be closer to the European Union. The same situation with Armenia and Azerbaijan. They expressed a big desire to get closer to the European Union. Of course, Armenia has its specific localization between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Of course, the sovereignty was determined by its defeat in Nagorno-Karabakh war. A few years ago, in 2015, Armenia decided to join Eurasian Economic Union, and it's of course the instrument of making influence by Russian authorities in post-Soviet territories, and of course it limits the EU's possibilities as membership, excludes the similar types of agreements with other entities. When we talk about Azerbaijan, the last neighbor covered by Eastern Partnership, of course, it's the least involved in this program. And the reason of cooperation, of course, based on the energy security, on the energy sector, I mean oil, I mean natural gas, and it's of course the alternative to raw materials from Russia. Of course, after the last summit, which was held in 2021, Eastern Partnership had a lot of very ambitious goals. For example, reconstruction of countries after the COVID pandemic, or of course increasing competitiveness of small and middle-sized enterprises by preparing its for using EU for Business program, or for example in research and innovation program as Horizon Europe, or just joint combating of disinformation narratives about neighborhood policy of European Union, or entire European Union, or even more the all West. Of course, we have to ask what's next for the Eastern Partnership in this situation. Of course, it's difficult to redefine the goals, redefine the objectives of this program. But we have to remember that Eastern Partnership is now, as Agnieszka mentioned, all this neighborhood policy is now undermined by this Russian military invasion of Ukraine, and we have to make the Eastern Partnership not to be a hostage to Russia, to the Russia aggression. In the next year, we will have the next summit, and what we have to expect, the making new generation goals and priorities, because these countries under partnership, under a new status, have to decline what exactly they expect from the European Union and what their ambitions towards the European Union for the future. Let's move back for Ukraine and Moldova as the candidates of European Union. So, of course, this status is only the invitation and the door opening, but for Ukraine and Moldova, it's a change to go to the ball, where in the role of Cinderella or princess, it's just up to this country. Of course, it's a political decision that doesn't prejudge anything, but it's also a way, a path to the effective membership of these countries in the European Union. Of course, it will be an integration marathon, and it will be a lot of difficult conditions, difficult changes in international surrounding, also in internal European Union politics, but also in transformation of these countries. On the one hand, this status requires the transformation of Ukraine and Moldova, and on the other hand, it requires a change of the policy of EU institutions towards these countries, but also EU members, as Agnieszka mentioned. It's also very, very important because these countries have to make a united one joint statement, one joint voice in the international area.
Please to conclude, Marta.
Yes, of course, the last sentence is about how Ukrainians see this candidate status. They rate this state with great enthusiasm, with great expectation, and I have mentioned it, the expectation of miracles, but it's not a success happy end already. It's just the time to the next step, to the opening of the next chapter in EU-Ukrainian relationship. And with candidate status, Ukraine will have more opportunities to be heard in European Union policymakers, but it's a hard work, especially in the situation when military aggression is provoking this country to do many efforts to be on this path to join the European Union. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Marta, for your assessment of the situation in the Eastern Partnership as a whole, as a project, and in each country. And now it's a question for Jakub Olchowski. Russia's disinformation effort during the conflict has been enormous. It aims at discrediting not only Ukraine, but also countries offering aid and support, especially Poland and Lithuania. So can it be said that Russia has arrived its objectives regarding Ukraine, Poland, and the European Union as an organization during this armed conflict? Is Russia acting effectively to disunite the European Union and Western countries in general? So Jakub, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, I think that Russia is successful. However, I don't think that Russia has already achieved its objectives. But yes, it is successful, and well, no surprises. Russia is successful in disinformation and propaganda because Russia has know-how and Russia has expertise, and the Soviet Union did it before, and the Russian Empire did it even before. So they just know how to do it. And well, it's very easy to answer the question why Russia has chosen such a strategy. This is in its strategic interest because Russia perfectly knows that confronted with the West, with the united West, Russia has no chance in such an open confrontation with against the West, united West, of course, because well, in the field of economy, just take a look at the numbers. and that's enough. When it comes to the military, just take a look at this war, and look at the performance of the Russian army on one hand, and the performance of the Ukrainian army, trained and organized according to Western standards, on the other hand. And for example, when it comes to soft power, do Western people buy houses and real estates in Russia? Do they go for holidays to Russia? Do they send their children to schools and universities in Russia, or vice versa? So Russia, in open confrontation with the West as a whole, has no chance. So this is why Russia has chosen a strategy to divide the West, to break the unity, to destroy the unity of West, and has been doing it for years, for decades. So of course it is successful to a great extent. To a great extent is successful, and because it uses a lot of instruments, including disinformation, propaganda, blackmail, corruption, energy, etc., etc. We know that. We know that. We could see that for many years. This is all they call active measures. But when it comes to your question regarding Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, I think it's very difficult to answer it just like that, because it's not simple. When it comes to Ukraine, I think that, well, Ukraine has been at war against Russia not since February 24 this year, but since the beginning of 2014. So they had a lot of time to prepare. They had a lot of time to become resistant, to become, so to say, Russia-proof. So Russian disinformation and propaganda is not very effective in Ukraine, actually. And in Lithuania also, because Lithuania is really adamant. Lithuania, we have to remember, sometimes we forget about it in Poland, that Lithuania used to be a part of the Soviet Union for decades. So they still have this memory of being a part of empire. We don't have such a memory because we were not included into the Soviet Union. So Lithuania is also very strong when it comes to resisting Russian disinformation and propaganda, despite a large Lithuanian Russian minority in Lithuania. In case of Poland, it looks a bit different because the Russian propaganda and disinformation addressed to Polish people is mostly focused on anti-Ukrainian sentiment, which is quite strong in some parts of the Polish society. And the Russians, they use it, and they use it, well, to some extent quite successfully, because actually for many years it was, we can say, their success, that Polish-Ukrainian relations were still not very good, to say it very gently. Now it has changed, and now it has changed to be honest, in a very unexpected way. And now for Ukrainians, more than 90% of Ukrainians declare that Poland is the best friend of Ukraine. More than 90% of Polish people say that, yes, we have to support Ukraine, we have to help Ukraine, and we do it. So this is really unexpected, especially from the Russian perspective, I suppose. So this is why Russia tries again to divide the Poles and the Ukrainians. But I don't think this is our biggest problem right now regarding Russian disinformation. I think that, of course, if we are talking about Poland, Lithuania, or the eastern flank in general, what the most important thing is regarding Russian disinformation is building our picture in the West, because Poland and other countries of the eastern flank are shown by Russian propaganda, by Russian disinformation in the West as Russophobic countries. Of course, this is ridiculous, because when Russia invades you, kills you, rapes you, and ruins or destroys your home, you call it a barbarian invasion. It's not Russophobia. This is, as was mentioned before, this is just calling a spade a spade. This is presented in the West as a Russophobia. So Poland is described in the West as a Russophobic country, and the country that, because of its wild Russophobia, wants to unleash a war in Europe. So this is what we should care about, because it's not our interest to be presented to have such an image in the West or no matter where, because we also have to remember that we live in a kind of a filter bubble. We all live in some filter bubbles, and of course, Western filter information bubble is mostly anti-Russian, anti-Putin right now. But it doesn't look like this in Africa, in South America. The Russians are very active in the infosphere in Africa and South America too, and they are quite successful about it. And not because Africa and South America are pro-Russian. They are not, but they are anti-Western. And this is what Russians take advantage of. Well, to sum up, I think that our biggest problem, I mean the eastern flank countries or Central Europe in general. I think that our biggest problem is that Russia tries to present, to describe our countries as irrational and Russophobic, and it is not true. But we have to overthrow this Russian narrative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakub, for your assessment of Russia's disinformation campaign and how Russia is trying to divide Europe as a whole. So, and now let's go to the second round of questions, and I'm looking for rather briefly answer. And the first question goes to Marta Drabczuk. The war in Ukraine is ongoing. However, Ukraine is already planning its reconstruction. So it is a real and valid effort, or more of a propaganda campaign? What is clear is that the reconstruction will be extremely costly in financial terms. So briefly asking, who will pay for it? So Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, we need to underline that rebuilding of Ukraine is not a choice; it's a necessity. It's a inevitability. It's because Ukrainian authorities have to make all to return citizens to their homes, at least wherever they can do it, of course, because when we talking about Ukrainian citizens, they have at about a quarter have had to leave their homes because of Russian aggression. Briefly, because of course some propositions are made, some plans of rebuilding are running already. The first plan for reconstruction of Ukraine, so-called U-24, was established by Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal in April, and it already run. It has, of course, 3 stages. The first stage is just like cleaning up after Russian devastating. The second one is to keep safe everything what is left, and the third one is Of course, I mean restore connectivity, electricity, water supply, and so on, internet for millions of householders that have been cut off from the rest of the country. And the third stage will be very cost and very long for the completely reconstruction of Ukraine. Of course, we have a special in Ukraine approved by European Commission reconstruction plan, which was prepared on basis of an analysis of the needs and losses of Ukraine, but we have no the exact scale of devastation. So when we talk about reconstruction, I have to mention four so-called R's for Ukraine. The first R is response. So the Ukrainian authorities have to take response for the people of Ukraine. The second is return the people, return to their homes and to make their homes safety. The third one is recovery. Recovery, I mean, it's something like a return to the normal life. And the last one is rebuild according to the new vision of future of Ukraine, as modern techniques, green energy, smart solutions, to make the technological leap, because this reconstruction is also a chance for Ukraine to make a technological leap to the better future life. Of course, the important is to give an answer who will pay for it. The main slogan of reconstruction is, of course, build back better. When we talk about Ukraine, we have the last a few weeks conference in Lugano, and we have representatives of over 14 countries and a lot of international organizations, of course, European Investment Bank, OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and so on. They all signed Lugano Declaration, and we know that the reconstruction of Ukraine, the recovery, will cost a lot of billions. We have such plan for recovery, such plan for rebuild, so-called Marshall Plan 2.0, something like was on Marshall Plan in the 15th, when we rebuilt Europe after the Second World War. But Ukraine is more destroyed, and we don't know when this war will exactly end. That's why the damages are huge. We can talk about, of course, some numbers of money, but the amount is unbelievable, because we know that the reconstruction of Ukraine will take place in a few stages. Some of this devastation will never possible to recover. I mean, the natural and the human facilities, they will never be rebuilt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you are right that this reconstruction would be costly and time-consuming for sure. But the problem is that the war is ongoing, and that's the main problem, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole region. And my question goes to Jakub Olchowski. And how can Central European countries assist Ukraine more effectively or act effectively in order to stop the war in Ukraine? And how possible is it that the conflict can be ceased? How strongly does it depend on Ukraine and its willingness to talk peace? So what's your perspective, Jakub, on that situation? And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think that any willingness of Ukrainians to negotiate with Russians has nothing to do with a resolution or ending of this conflict, because any negotiations with Russia are pointless. Ukraine has no choice but to fight. Ukraine has to fight because Russia is not negotiable. President Zelensky said recently that Ukraine would be like Israel, constantly at war, and the security will be a top priority, because if they stop fighting, they will be erased from the map as a nation and as a state. So no negotiations with Russia will end this war, because Russia is what is not understood in the West, basically, because the West thinks that Russia is like a Westphalian style state. So that Russia thinks about international politics in terms of business. I need something, you need something, so I will give you something and you will give me something. No, Russia is like, we have in Poland such a proverb, if you give them your finger, they will take your hand. So no, there is no sense to negotiate with Russia. What Eastern Central Europe countries could do to help more effectively to Ukrainians? First of all, I think that we have to tell the West, to keep telling the West what Russia actually is and what Russia is like in fact. Secondly, we should, I think, build a common Central Eastern European identity, including Ukraine to this into this region, so to say. But of course, as Agnieszka said in the beginning, it should be done, of course, under the umbrella or in cooperation with the European Union. It doesn't make sense to say to the European Union, so you are somewhere else and we are here. No, we are all together. This is our problem, our European problem, not just Central European or Eastern European problem. And finally, of course, we have to keep helping Ukraine in every possible way, including humanitarian assistance, including political support, including financial support, and of course the military support. This is crucial, because Ukraine has to win this war, because, as we said, it is pointless to think and to count on any negotiations with Russia.
Yes, thank you very much, Jakub. You are right that it's really important that Ukraine should win this war and have to win this war, because it's in our interest, and to stop this kind of neo-imperialistic approach made by Russia. So you are right. And the final question goes to Agnieszka Bryc. To what extent can Russia destabilize the whole Eastern Europe in order to achieve its objectives? I mean, not only Ukraine, but also Moldova and other post-Soviet countries. And from your perspective, to what extent is Eastern Europe, Ukraine especially, an example of a proxy war and Russia's attempt at destabilizing and crushing the collective West? So are there any prospects for Russia's swift cessation of hostilities? So Agnieszka, the floor is yours.
In terms of Russia, just imagine the sky is the limit. Absolutely, we have to understand once and forever that when we are talking about Russia's policy vis-a-vis post-Soviet countries, vis-a-vis so-called close neighborhood, so vis-a-vis so-called Eastern Europe, we have to understand that war is always an option at the table. Yeah, this is the card Russia is always ready to use. But at the same time, if not the war, which is very possible, Russia has a full range of instruments. Let's start from, I don't know, from hybrid instruments, let's start from attacking very sensitive infrastructure, as it used to happen in the post-Soviet area. Let's go through propaganda and dividing and fueling post-Soviet societies. And we might end up with gas blackmailing this winter, and we might end up with a migration crisis along post-Soviet countries' borders. So the instruments Russia might use are plenty of, there are plenty of them. So we might imagine, all the way of all the instruments Russia is ready to use, but the most important is that what we should realize is that Russia is ready to use force, and this is not theory. This is the reality. But we also should understand that we also might stop the war and make Russia, how to say, forget about, maybe not forget, but we also are able to deprive Russia its new imperial ambitions for a long time. And this is the condition of the real peace and the quick end of the war. So we have two options. If we want to stop the war immediately, so we have two solutions. At first, to wait a little bit till, for example, the end of that year. But at the same time, we should put more pressure. We should follow the strategy of the maximum pressure on Russia to make Russia, as I told in the first round of our discussion, to make Russia be defeated in a military way, but at the same time to make Russia collapse economically. Only this way we might feel better, more secure, and we will achieve peace, because otherwise Russia will lick its wounds for a while, and after several years it might go back with absolutely and being convinced that it has survived spectacular sanctions, and nothing can stop Russia anymore. So for us, this is to be or not to be moment. Yes, so we have to. This is not our, this is not the feature of, as you mentioned, Central European. This is maybe not you, Tomek, but Kuba, talking about Russophobic, let's say, Russophobic stance of Central European countries. This is not true. This is our, this is our historical experience. So the second option, and here I would stop, is the second option is just to push Kiev and push President Zelensky to stop the war immediately and make Kiev to accept a ceasefire, to talk to Russia, and to agree for all concessions. But it would be a double failure for us, because we would achieve the end of war immediately. But as I mentioned previously, after several years, we will have once again Russia, which is very imperialistic and very aggressive. So in our best interest is to not to give up, just to put more pressure, just to tighten sanctions, to accept and adopt new embargo on Russia, just to let Russia be in retreat, because Russia is ready to retreat. Russia is ready to, it means once the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia also might take the defeat. So we cannot allow President Putin to save his face, because in our good, as I mentioned, interest is just to not to think about Putin's face, but we have to think about our security and our as the European Union and the community of democratic and free countries. We have to think about ourselves, not about the face and the good humor of President Putin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka, and your speech was a kind of summarizing speech of our discussion. So unfortunately, the time is speeding fast. So I would like to extend a warm thanks to our panelists, I mean Agnieszka, Marta, and Jakub, for sharing your views with us. And I do hope that we will have a chance to talk about the EU's eastern neighborhood, about Ukraine in general, and about other Eastern European countries. And also, I would like to thank the main institutional partners of this grant. So thank you very much, and see you soon. So bye-bye.